that you did some work with Audible.
I did, yeah, that's
What'd you do
right.
with them?
Well, I've worked with several hundred tech companies. They were one of them. I worked with them both before they were acquired by Amazon and then after they were acquired. And mostly I do the same things with companies. I just help them try to get better at product.
Yeah, you just tell them, look, people want to listen to the books, and they're like, Marty, you're a genius. This is what we're doing.
No, they knew that. They knew that. They were very early too. There's an untold story behind Audible that not enough people get to hear. And I'm with you. I love listening to books. It's a blast. I wish I had more time for it because it's kind of a slow way to read a book, but it's such a cool way to read a book.
I love it. It's passive. Like you can do it in the car, right? Going to work and be consuming content, or in the shower rather than having to hold the physical book.
Yeah, but it's also very immersive. That's what I love about it. I can imagine, my grandparents talked about how, they'd listen to shows on the radio, and that's kind of what I imagine.
War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of the voice too, like with the Alexas and the Google Homes. Do you have any of those?
Sure. And I am too. I wrote about early Alexa effort recently. Actually, that's an article. I did just send you one link, but I probably should have sent you. There's one that has got a lot of attention from engineers and CTOs called, it's called, what is it? Customer Inspired Technology Enabled. And it talks about a lot of the best innovations out there and how basically all of them came from the engineers. And including the early Alexa story. Alexa didn't start as Alexa, it started as a much more modest and pretty unexciting thing. And one of the engineers just saw the potential. So, and actually, I told this in this article, I tell the story of 6 very impressive products like that.
Oh yeah, I want to read that. Did you send me that link?
I will.
Yeah, and I'll post it in the show notes too, so people can go check that out. Now, you're a fantastic author, Marty.
Oh, thanks.
I very much enjoy the way I found your book. I was at my friend Derek's house, and he's a CTO, and it looked beautiful, and it was on the on his bookshelf, and it said how to create products customers love, and I was like, oh man, like how can you ignore that title? Right? Even if you feel like you know what you're doing, that title just says like, come read me, right? So I picked it up and I started flipping through it, and I was like, oh, this is real smart. I ended up borrowing the book. That was when I actually read, like with the pages and whatnot. Now I sound old, right? No, so
was it a black book or a white book?
Black with the orange bottom.
Yeah, so that was the first edition of Inspired. I just recently published the second edition, which is actually a 100% rewrite. And that's the one I sent you a review from a CTO on the new edition. So.
Oh, excellent. So so it's 100% rewrite, but you kept the name and title, and then like, can you get better than perfect?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a 10-year-old book now. It just hit in January this month. It's 10 years old.
No way.
Yeah, so it's shocking how much is still relevant. That surprises even me, but it's not really that. I focus on principles anyway, which are meant to be, last a long time, but still, all of the things I talk about, I think there's way better ways to talk about now. So, and a lot more recent examples. And so I ended up just completely rewriting it.
Oh, okay. I will definitely check it out. Yeah. So I'm not like always super nice and super happy to everybody if you listen to the show. Like I'm not just being nice to you. I genuinely believe in your work. Here's what happened. So I got your book from Derek, and I went home. This is a couple years ago, maybe. I don't know. Time is actually kind of difficult for me now that I'm getting older, but and I'm only 30, so like I'm not that old. I started taking notes. I'm like, oh yeah, I came across this. This is right. This is I felt like I was a craftsman or like a tool maker, and I've made this library of tools over the course of my experience. But then I walked into a hardware store where there's these like refined tools that are like really, really good. And so I just started eating them up. And then I had to stop taking notes because I realized I was essentially just transcribing your book. I was like, okay, I'm not taking any more notes. I'm like, 10 pages in and I'm just done. I'm just going to now recommend the book to people. Right.
Well, that's good. It's cool that people like it. It's fun to write.
Yeah, so I'm reading in your background, right? Doing the show notes, prepping for the show, talking with Marty, and I see that I saw 1990s and Netscape, and instantly, boom, right in my mind, I was like, browser wars. Like, were you a part of this?
On the periphery, I got to watch the whole browser wars. I was responsible for platform and tools. So there was a separate team that was doing browser and a separate team that was doing server. Um, but yeah, it was it was unfortunate because that is what actually led to the demise of Netscape. So, and I totally adored Netscape. I would still be working there if I could. But we did lose the browser wars after about 6 years, um, and then the company was acquired by AOL, and it's not the same after that. And I joined eBay after that.
So why did you like it? Was it the relationships, the people there, or?
Well, a number of things. First of all, there were the most amazing, people like, Ben Horowitz was there, Mark Andreessen was there. I mean, I could list literally 40 names that have gone on to just sort of greatness around the industry. Um, and so working with these people was amazing. But even more, I thought, Netscape was kind of the birth of the internet. And so it was really the epicenter for this whole new industry. And so for a product person, this is awesome. We didn't even have to leave the building. Customers were coming to us literally every day, and startups were coming to us literally every day. And so it doesn't really get much better than that. And the technology was moving so fast, and people were doing things that they could never do before. That's always a lot of fun. And I got to watch so many companies get born, like Amazon and eBay and Yahoo, and then about a year later Google, and a couple years later Facebook. It's just it's amazing thing to watch. Cool.
Yeah. So I like the Amazon reference too. I saw one of the old pictures has been circulating the internet of Bezos with his, wood table and his like handwritten sign, right? And we moved into a new office, expanding, and we've been so busy the past month that I hadn't had a chance to change the outside sign, right? We don't have a lot of people come to the physical office anyways. So it's not like a something that occurs often. But then I was just like, it's kind of Bezos-like. So I removed my motivation for changing the all the signs all outside. But I see you have some formal education with, like, I call it like old education, with some Stanford stuff. And I'm just kind of curious, like, did you find a lot of value in your education, like collegiate like education, or no?
Well, my education was computer science, and I definitely feel like that's what uh, that was the key for me, because it gave me. I was kind of in that first wave of engineers, and it meant that I had amazing job offers. I didn't even have to leave the campus. Apple and HP and several other companies. I narrowed it down to HP and Apple, and then chose HP. But so if I hadn't have learned how to code basically that way, I actually learned to code as a kid. So it's not really that I learned to code, but I did learn a lot. And it is true, every developer I know, what they teach you in school and what it's really like to develop software for real products is different for sure. But I felt like I had a good foundation, and most importantly, it got me some really good job offers, and I joined a great team at HP Labs. And so that's where I really learned to write software, as at HP Labs. And um, so that was useful. And I also did that at Stanford. It's their executive MBA. It's just it's a summer program. And for me, that was perfect, because there's no way I wanted to stop, building products for 2 years and go get an MBA. And
Right.
so a summer was just right. Yeah, and HP was really good about sending you there. And anyway, I liked that. That was enough.
Yeah. Do any college professors, have they ever reached out to you and let you know that they actually use your book in their college courses?
Well, not my college professors. I don't know. That was a long time ago. But there are lots of. My book is actually used in a lot of classes in business schools, in software engineering programs, and computer science. Probably because there aren't, in that space, there's not that many choices.
And was this your first book?
Yeah, it was my first book.
Oh, oh man. Oh, that might be kind of tough though, right? You come out and you have like an amazing book. Now you set the bar super high.
That's true. I was nervous, turning out a whole new edition, because what if people didn't like it as much? But I felt like this is true with any product too. You gotta take risks, and if you're gonna make it better. I believe it's significantly better, and so far all the reviews have sort of agreed with me, so that's good.
And I'll Audible it. It's Audible, right?
It is going to come out on Audible. The publisher is doing the Audible thing now, but it's on, of course, Kindle and print right now.
Are you doing the voiceover?
I offered to, but they don't seem
Oh.
very excited about having an author do it. They said that.
What? That's the best ones. I'm an Audible listener. If you look at my Audible, you'd be like, wow, he actually really does listen to Audible. I mean, I'm consuming the great courses. Like, that's how I fall asleep. the foundations of Western civilization is how I fell asleep the past 56 course hours. So like, I like that stuff. I like passively consuming educational content. I love it when the author is the one speaking.
Yeah, I do too. And I said that, but they just said that Audible and the publishers, they said they found that in general books do better when it's read by a professional voice.
All right. Interesting. I've been I'm assuming that in some way you use Facebook, like even if it's locked down for just your family, right?
I do, although I've been to be honest, I have been contemplating if I want to continue with that.
So I do it because my wife tags me. We have a 4-month-old baby girl. Okay. It's first child.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm getting tagged about 75 times a day. This is the baby wearing this outfit. This is the baby eating food. This is me refinishing furniture while the baby watches. So like quite a bit. So I go in there, I check it. And also the show has a Facebook page where I engage with CTOs, which is kind of cool. But I noticed they added this non-blocking animations is a trend I'm starting to see. And it maybe have been a trend and I'm just not picking up on it. But what I mean by that is like you hit the like and like a bunch of like icons
Sure. Yeah.
animate up and out. But traditionally animations were blocking. And I would say, yes, I want it. And then a success message would come up and the little check mark would animate. And like it would block, that animation would block me from interacting with the app. So I'm noticing these sort of like passive non-blocking animations coming up. And then I start talking about this with some friends. And then I flip open this app called Musical.ly, which apparently is just taking the world by storm, music with the next generation. And it looks like it's so busy. There's icons and stars and it looks like a crazy game. Like there's so much happening. It's so intense about what's going on. And my question for you is, are these busier interfaces? Do you think that they're short-lived or do you think they're going to be like long-term?
Well, it's actually more complicated than that. This is fresh in my head, this topic, because I just came back. Every year or two, I go to China. And I don't know if you've had a chance to visit there, but in the tech world, it's just amazing. And I've been going there for now 20 years. And it is, there, if a typical American looks at one of their services or apps, they're like, oh my God, how could people stand this? It's like nonstop. My head is spinning. It's so busy. It makes our stuff look like Craigslist or something.
Right.
And the truth is, they are dramatically successful. I mean, they have 750 billion internet users there, and 750 million internet users. It is massive. And so it's not as simple as saying, is this just a design trend or not? Depending on the application, depending on the user, sometimes it is more appropriate. Actually, isn't Musically also a Chinese? I think it's a Chinese service too. But anyway, so it's, you kind of have to judge each one independently based on the goals and its users. And sometimes it's, one of the easiest ways to do that is different cultures around the world. Like South Korea famously likes these just more rich or crowded, cluttered interfaces. Japan likes these, and China definitely likes these. And a lot of the more Western cultures prefers otherwise, but I think that doesn't mean that one is necessarily good or bad. It's whatever is necessary for that product and that audience.
No, that, as you're talking, I'm thinking about this conversation. So one of my friends is Jack, and he's the president of the opera, and we have a fairly popular opera in our city, like Opera House.
Mm-hmm.
And we were eating lunch, and he was telling me about how, historic, like back in the day, right? People would come listen to these operas because they were sensory overload. Like, people might think that they're boring now. Oh, you got a person singing and some music playing. But for then, what they were experiencing in their regular everyday life, when they would come to this opera and watch, there would be so much happening, so much to take in. It was like sensory overload. And so when you were talking, I was thinking about that. Like, I do see it more in games than I do in business apps, maybe because, that's part of your everyday life, the sort of business app. And in the games, maybe for the next generation, they're making them a lot more stimulating.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly game mechanics, and this idea of really keeping people's attention is one dimension. You're right, it shows up a lot in games, but you just have to look. This is where, design is one of the three key roles in product, and it's I have so much respect for great designers, great interaction designers, experience designers, visual designers, industrial designers. They are, it's a super hard problem that they're asked to tackle and come up with really the right experience for that customer trying to solve whatever problems they're trying to work on. So yeah, I try to keep an open mind. And I also know just because I don't like an interface really is meaningless if I'm not in the target market, for sure.
Absolutely. In China, have you seen a business system or some sort of business utility like a CRM or something like that has a Dance Revolution style busy interface?
Well, I haven't, but the truth is, because of the language difference, I have a hard time really, I can't do like I can in the US where I can just go sit down and play with an app or something. I don't know what the financial app is saying. I couldn't tell you if it's a payroll app or a CRM app. So
you go to open your bank account and it's like 2 kittens and a duck. You're like, am I broke?
Right.
My sister actually lives in Shenzhen, and she's been there for quite a while. So I talk to her all the time, and that's just a main city in China. And
yeah, sure. She could probably answer that. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if there is this trend around the world called consumerization of the enterprise, which is bringing a lot of consumer practices to business software. And so I would not be surprised if some of that has been done. Just like you can see LinkedIn adapt a lot of Facebook techniques over the years, for sure.
If somebody has a relationship at LinkedIn, they need to go work on their ad platform. If you try, you go spend 10 minutes creating an ad on Facebook, and then you go spend 10 minutes creating an ad on LinkedIn. Like, LinkedIn feels like their ad system feels like the outsourced, like, $2,000 that they spent to have someone make an ad system. Like, it frustrated me. And then it was really expensive. So I was just like, and I don't mess with ads on LinkedIn right now because of it.
Yeah.
Too frustrating. That's a user experience thing though. Like if it was pleasant to make ads on their system and they were more expensive, I still might do it, but it's frustrating and it's more expensive, and that marks me out. So
Yeah, if though you really do, if your business needs to be on LinkedIn, then that's sort of the only game in town, and so that's why LinkedIn makes so much money from advertisements.
right.
Yeah.
So your book, the title, right? Inspired How to Create Products Customer Love. Do you have a sort of like one sentence answer to that title? Like when I say, hey, Marty, how do you create products customers love? Do you have some sort of quick answer for that?
Uh, no, is the
Good.
truth. In fact, I usually start by telling people, doing a great technology-powered product is super hard. Many things have to be done well. If any of them doesn't get done well, you have a failure. So that's kind of my elevator's pitch: is doing product is hard. Don't fool yourself. And in fact, I think, there's always people that try to tell you it doesn't have to be hard. And I think they're not helping anybody by saying that.
Yeah, because when I saw that question, right? Like I don't necessarily think thoughts; they kind of just pop into my head. Like I didn't manufacture them necessarily,
Mhm.
but what came through my mind was I was actually trying to be a little introspective and think back to the products that I love and think about why I love them, right? And what I came up with for me personally, right, is when the result is greater or equal to than the expected value. So what I mean by that is when a product does what I expect it to do, I'm happy and I like it. When it exceeds my expectation, I love it. And when something happens that I don't expect at all and it's not what I wanted, then I dislike it. And so I kind of look at it as when expectation and reality are in sync, or the reality is greater than the expectation, that's when I love a product.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable trait of a successful product is, exceed the expectations for sure.
Not a
But
successful product, it's one someone loves.
yeah, well, there's that too. It's it's hard enough to actually do something that your customers love, but it's even harder. You have to do it in a way that your customers love, but also works for your business. And
Right.
that's where a lot of companies, a lot of teams, product teams fall over, is they think all we have to do is make our users love us. And I'm like, no, unfortunately, it's a lot harder than that. You have to do it in a way that you can afford as a business. You have to do it in a way that doesn't get you in trouble with the SEC or get you in trouble with the law, or in trouble with privacy advocates. I mean, or in trouble with your marketing organization, or it has to be something your salespeople can sell. I mean, there are so many, it's a lot harder than just something your users love.
Right. I First of all, I agree with that. So I have two products. So we don't, first of all, we don't do any ads. Like this is a value-based show, right? We're having you on to bring value, and I'm just doing this as sort of like, this is what I enjoy doing. Like I enjoy talking to smart people, enjoying talking technology. And before I was trying to do that like through building, because I have an app company and stuff, and I work with some VC firms, things like that. And that happens, that pays the bills, and that's whatever. But I noticed that that's the long way, because I'm going to get us, in those circumstances, I'm getting people to do business with me, or I'm being a part of a business deal. But I noticed that there's a much faster way. I just call people up and talk to them. And that's like what I enjoy doing. So this is what I love. And so I'm living, what I love in my dream, and I'm super happy. There's two products that I use, and no association, they don't pay me or anything. But I feel like that they're making me fall in love with them, like more and more. Not only did I initially fall in love with them, but I'm continually falling in love with them as they do new things. I'm like, asked myself this question this morning. I'm like, is Marty behind any of these? So it's the two I'm talking about are Envision, right, and Intercom. Have you heard of either of those?
Sure. Yeah, and I envision, yeah, and you're referring, do you use all their design tools?
I don't use all of them now.
But I mean,
Some of them. Yeah, I use them
many
to
of them.
mock up interfaces to
Yeah.
show people prototypes.
Yeah. I'm with you on Envision too, that I think they're terrific, and I love what they've been able to do. And I'm not an official advisor or investor in their company, but I have trained almost all of their product people, and design people, and friends with their CEO and the other co-founder is the designer, and love what they've been doing. And one of my partners, Leah Hickman, was their head of product, and I introduced her to them. And anyway, it's a great story for sure.
I knew you were close.
Yeah.
Do you know a gentleman by the name of Aaron Walter?
What's his last name?
Walter. He's the VP of design at Envision.
Oh, because
Well, they're
the chief,
growing like
yeah,
rapidly, so they might have pulled a VP of design in that you haven't met in their growth.
yeah. Um, oh no, he's the head of design education, not design. Yeah.
Ah, oh, Jenny, my
Yes.
producer, she's got. All right, he's the head of
Yeah.
design. Incorrect label here. Education. Nonetheless, going to be on the
Which is
show.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And they have done, by the way, I think they've done a beautiful job at building community around design. Really better than just about anybody else I know. It's a unique, and I think a very powerful approach to marketing. So that is terrific. Yeah, and that's what he does. And I think I have actually met him, but I was only surprised because their head of design is another guy. Um, and I'm trying to remember his name at the moment, but I'll remember it in a second.
What about do you know April Underwood?
Oh yeah, at Slack, sure, another
Yeah,
great product leader. Yeah.
she's on maternity leave right now, and we're trying to get her on the show.
Yeah, you
We
should.
reached out and we're like, oh man, I was reading about her online. I was like, oh, she's smart. Like this is good. This is good. We need to have April on the show. And so we reached out and they're like, oh, she's on maternity leave, so it may be difficult, but they didn't say no, right? And I'm always, I'm like, okay, cool. They didn't say no. So I grabbed the best looking picture of my daughter, like so cute, right? And I attached it to the email, and I'm like, all right, Jenny. She's like, the producer PR person, like Jenny, send it out and be like, oh, we want to talk about the kids too, because I just went through this. I just had my first child, and that's so much experience there, so many things happening,
Yeah.
See if we can get her on the show and let's talk about the designing great products with children or something. Let's find an angle, So it'd be cool if she were on this show.
She would be perfect. And Slack is an amazing story. So.
Oh, I know their story. I love them. I was a part of it since their invite stage. I follow them, and they keep delivering, and I keep using it. It's every project I have that I'm involved in, it's a requirement. And I used to have to establish it as a requirement, a few years ago as it was emerging, but now nobody even, like everyone already has their Slack. They're like, yeah, we use Slack too. I'm like, great.
Yeah, almost everybody does, which is amazing in and of itself, how quickly that's come.
Absolutely. I want to know, Marty, what gets Marty pumped up? Like what gets you excited in life?
Well, I do get a ton of energy from startup founders. There's not all of them. Some of them are just purely, mercenaries. You meet them and they're just clearly in it for the money, and fine, not very interested in those ones. But most of them, in my experience, are just so passionate about what they're working on, and genuinely trying to change the world in a good way. And I don't always get excited about their vision. Don't get me wrong. Some of them I love. Like when I heard about what Envision wanted to do, I loved it because I felt like there was room for that. Adobe had owned that space for years, but it was time for, there was definitely room for a new key player. But other times I'm like, yeah, well, there's probably a market there. I'm not excited about it myself, but that doesn't matter. It's that passion of the co-founders that really is it's amazing kind of energy, and I love that. And if I can help them in any way, try to maybe increase the odds that they succeed, I love that.
Oh, absolutely. And I loved Adobe's. I like their pivot when they went monthly. I thought that was a real smart move for them.
Well, it was incredibly smart and necessary, but most people don't appreciate just how incredibly hard that was, and how the vast majority of companies would never have had the courage to do what they did.
You mean rewriting and reworking your entire product line across like 20 uniquely written apps that are like huge, massive feature bases? Yeah.
Yes,
I
yes,
appreciate that,
but
Marty.
on top of that, that's literally taking 50% of the revenue of Adobe, $2 billion, and putting it all at risk. That kind of
Wow.
bet is really rare. I wrote about that story if you're interested in the
I am
backstory.
very interested.
Yeah, it's one of the most amazing stories in our industry, and it's largely an untold story because people know that they're the fastest company to $1 billion in subscription revenue, but they have no idea what happened to make that happen.
Right. What sort of content do you consume? Like, what's your digital diet look like?
Well, sounds like you. I do like to read. I would say one of the most important, because I'll tell you, my challenge is keeping up with all of the sub industries in technology that I work with. I mean, I work with companies not based on their industry. It's more about their team, and so there are many more industries than I actually know about. And so following those closely would be a full-time job. And I actually, this isn't a secret, I've told other people they should do the same thing, but do you know the blog Stratechery?
No, say that again.
It's a goofy name, and it's spelled STRATECHERY.com. Stratechery.
Oh, yeah.
And it is by far, I think, the best blog on technology strategy and analysis. And he follows the entire technology industry and is incredibly insightful. This is all he does, is follow the industry and write daily his analysis. And so that's my digital diet in terms of work stuff. Usually starts with about a half an hour reading and thinking about what he has to say. And then and that covers probably 80% of the companies that I even interact with. So that's a huge time saver for me. And also, I think he's such a good thinker about strategy that it makes me a better thinker about strategy.
How'd you find him?
He's pretty well known in the tech industry, and he's been going for a while. His name is Ben Thompson. Um, yeah, you'd like it. For CTOs, one of my favorite blogs is called Code as Craft. Do you know that blog?
No, but I'm in love with the name.
Yeah. So one of the best companies in the product world is Etsy, Etsy. You know
Oh,
Etsy
yeah. Oh, of
probably.
course. Yep.
And they produce a blog called Code as Craft.
Oh,
Yeah, I've known Etsy. I mean, I was an advisor at Etsy when they were just a few co-founders, and now they're huge and public. But they have been publishing this blog that really thinks deeply about how to build product. Um, and so I love their blog, and they've written, I mean, it's now more than 10 years of great content. So you should check that out. And actually, I strongly encourage, CTOs to read that. It's a great one.
yeah, better. Yeah, we're gonna have these people on the show.
Yeah,
I have to
well,
call up Ben Thompson.
well, he'd be great for you to have on the show probably. And another one, so Etsy just hired a new CTO, um, I mean, they've had actually a pretty legendary CTO, and then but the company's pretty old and public now, and they just hired a new one who's fantastic. His name's Mike Fisher. He was the CTO at PayPal before, and he's a great thinker in terms of technology leadership. Um, so he'd be a good guy for you to interview as well if you haven't.
And say his name again.
Michael Fisher.
Michael Fisher. And was he there when Musk was there?
When who was there?
Musk, Elon was there?
I don't think, oh, you mean at PayPal?
Yeah.
No, he came after, a little after.
He had to clean up the mess.
I mean, yeah, that was, but I love early PayPal actually, and there was a lot of, I mean, it was an incredibly fast-growing company, but dealing with scale is, as you know, is super hard. It's
Yeah.
the biggest challenge for most CTOs, and he was there through a major stretch of growth for PayPal. And anyway, he's advised CTOs for the last like 7 or 8 years, and then he decided to join Etsy because it's a pretty prestigious position to be Etsy's CTO, and he couldn't turn it down. So he had been advising them for many years also.
Oh, excellent. I'm going to, by the way, we're going to figure this out, Marty. I'm going to put some people together, and we're going to get Musk and Bezos. I'm going to fly out there. They're all in California, and you and I, we're going to go meet them, have lunch with them, high five them. You can talk the whole conversation. I just want to be the fly on the wall.
Yeah, I wish, but they're in a different orbit. But they're pretty impressive for sure.
Excellent. CTOs, off the cuff advice. I know when we sent the email, we talked about CTO shouldn't be involved in the product UI design. That was your stance. I had like this initial knee-jerk reaction, like what? And then I used some of my personal principles, right, with boiling it back down, and taking using Marty as my spirit animal, basically like assuming your role and thinking about your experience. And because people don't just say stuff, usually, like smart people don't usually just say stuff. They have experience behind it, and that's how they came to their conclusions, right? So I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna try to get inside Marty's mind. Like, where is he coming from when he's saying that they shouldn't be a part of it? Because in my experience, it's different. So I tried to blend the two and figure it out. And here's what I came up with. You ready for it?
Yeah.
A lot of the experience that I'm having with CTOs, so I started finding all the CTOs in the world and emailing every single one of them. Like personally, like I spent just ungodly amounts of time, Marty, just reaching out to them, researching them, asking them questions, talking to them. I want to get a feel for the heartbeat of this community. And what I found was very surprising to me. I found that over 60%, almost as high as 80% of the people who wear that label, right? The people who wear the label, they have the experience of going from developer to CTO. So they were writing some code, and then they got a co-founder or someone together, and then they wrote a code of a first version of the application, and then they started to grow the company. That is the majority of what I experience on a day-to-day basis, right? Those types of people. So where I was coming from when I'm asking that is my goal in life is I did that. I was a developer that became a CTO, and that was my experience. And I struggled to learn all of these things. I wish I would have found your book. First of all, I wish you would have written it 20 years ago. Secondly, I wish I would have been there on the day it was released, because it probably wouldn't have meant the same to me, because when you go through struggle and have pain and like learn hard experiences, the information means more to you than just words on the page, right? So from that perspective, I wanted to bring some value and bring on an expert like you to give some advice to the CTOs. So I've kind of grouped them into 3 categories, because I talked to all of them and they all kind of fall into these 3 categories. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you kind of like a context, and then I'm going to ask you for like, just off the top, whatever comes to your mind. It's not a difficult thing. The advice that you would give them. Is that cool?
Sure.
Okay. So the first would be like the startup CTO. This is what I was describing before. It's majority of CTOs, and they're usually 1 to 2 people developing a product, and the person developing is usually the CTO, or he's writing code, or he's wearing that label. And so I found that when I did it, I didn't have a lot of UI UX experience. I had none. I just started writing and testing. So what advice would you, other than read my book, what advice would you give the sort of like the startup CTO, the new CTO who's just developing something with a partner?
Well, so this is more of the co-founder CTO.
Yeah.
And it's a very small team. And I want to be careful. I don't want to sound hypocritical, because I actually had the same path as you there. I started as an engineer and moved up and was CTO of a startup called Continuous Software. And I also had design and product under me. So I had all three of those roles. But again, this started as 4 people and ended up as like 100 people. And then eventually they went public and were acquired by IBM. But that was, they went through those stages. So it's not impossible. But what we are talking about really is what's best practice and how do you really increase your chances of success. And when I did that startup, that was just before the internet. That was like 1990 to 1995. That was, to be honest, design was nascent compared to what it is now. So I think I got lucky. We kind of got away with it. I don't think you can get lucky like that today. Well, in fact, I usually encourage, well, first of all, there's a principle in software that's that's actually best stated in a famous book that every CTO should read. It's called The Inmates Are Running the Asylum. Have you heard of this?
Oh, no, but the title again is amazing.
Yeah, well, his point, it was written by a very famous, engineering architect, the guy who actually was behind Visual Basic from Microsoft. And he explained the reason so many products are so bad is because they are being designed by engineers. And he was arguing that the reason that it's bad, and again, I admitted in the beginning, I was trained in computer science, so I had to say I'm guilty of the same thing. When you're trained in computer science, you're trained in how to solve problems in ways that are represented on the computer, as opposed to how to get inside users' heads. It's about implementation models rather than user mental models. And his argument was the reason so much software is so bad is because it's being designed by engineers. And this is a very famous book. It was written by Alan Cooper. And I think once that book probably got out there, and that was like 15 years old at this point, but it's still a famous and popular book. Most of the time engineers realize that they are not to actually design software well. Now, building software is different than designing the experience. Of course, I'm not talking about building the experience, building the front end. I'm talking about designing the front end or designing the experience. And that is a special skill set. Now, I do happen to know a handful of great engineers that are also great at design. But that's a true unicorn in truth. Those are very rare people. I love it when I meet these people.
I only know one. He's the one that gave me your book.
Well, so those people are awesome. And if, I always tell people if they've got people like that, don't ever lose them. They are so valuable. But the vast majority are not like that. So you either get a bad experience or bad code, one or the other, and I don't think either of them are acceptable. So the principle is these are different skills. Most CEOs, not only do they not know how to design, they don't have those skills or talents, they don't even know what to look for, in truth.
Right.
And so this is normally and lives as part of product management and UX design. Those two are together, and that is best practice. Now, the others, we're still talking about your scenario here of early stage startup. My view is in an early stage startup, once you've hired 3 or 4 engineers, it's time really to hire a designer. Now, if you're an early stage startup, don't get me wrong, the designer is going to work for probably the CTO. It may be working for the CEO. Doesn't matter so much. What matters is you get a designer in there. Otherwise, I tell them they're wasting their engineers. As a company grows, it becomes a bigger issue. The other thing I would talk about is if you were when you interviewed these CTOs, and I don't know how many of them are honest with you on this, but if I ask this question of CEOs, how many of your companies are suffering or at least struggling with technical debt? And this is probably the single biggest topic for your audience, tech debt. And the vast majority of companies today struggle with tech debt in a minor to a major way. In fact, way too many of them to a major way. And so my point is, look, first, we need those CTOs to make sure they can enable the company to build what it needs to build. And so, occasionally I'll meet a CTO that is passionate about design or product, and they're like, great, but make sure first, you do your job that the whole company's counting on you to do. Otherwise, you could either kill the company, or very likely, the one who's fired from tech debt is almost always the CTO.
Yep.
So, they need to take that seriously. That's a huge, huge responsibility. Architecture, constantly improving, enabling the business to deliver on its vision. That is incredibly hard. Hiring and retaining great engineers is hard. Technology is hard. These are the core responsibilities of a CTO. Of course, I think it's a good trait when I meet CTOs that care about product and design. To me, that's a great sign. And every once in a while, you get a CTO like that. In fact, Etsy had a CTO like that. His name was Chad Dickerson, and they actually promoted him to be CEO, which is very rare. You may know there's not many CEOs that came from the CTO role. Most CEOs come from the product role. And I liked Chad from the very beginning, in large part because of that. He cared about not just building, but also creating a culture and creating great solutions for his customers. And so it's a positive trait. But even Chad, who cared about all that, he had a separate product design organization.
Right. And, I'm kind of fresh in this, right? Because it's happened over the past decade for me. That's why I wanted to start talking about it right away, rather than, waiting 20 years to start talking about it, right? So in that transition, what I noticed is going from developer to CTO, and then, CTO to almost like investor type individual, because once you go through making bad products and you learn to make good products, then once you making good products, then you figure out how to make products that make money and create value and bring value to the market. Then you figure out that it's all about the people, because people aren't buying, nobody buys a car to have a large 2,000-pound piece of metal in their garage. They buy a car for the value of transportation, right? Or for the value of something else, whether it makes them feel good because it sounds fast, or look, whatever it is. But you never buy something directly. You're always buying the byproduct or the value of something, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't buy your code directly. What they're doing is they're buying the value that your CRM code base brings them in their life, their ability to connect better with their relationships. So I started out feature first, because I was a developer, so I'm always writing features. So I started feature first. Then I figured out, okay, I got to go value first, and then I figured out, oh, you got to go talk to people and make sure that the value is actually a need in the market, right? So that the market demands this value exist. Otherwise, your business doesn't exist. And once I kind of put those together and realized, okay, well, it's all about people and value, then during that process, you have to really, kick up your EQ and become aware of these things, and then interact with people. And that sort of pulled me from my generally, introverted state, into more of like a understanding people, because it was fascinating for me. And then once I got through those stages, I was like, oh, well, this is just kind of how things work. So I could see what you mean when you're saying, you get a lot of product people that go to CEO, because product people tend to learn those things like immediately, or specialize in those things, and then go out in the world and try them. Right. Whereas me, I started specializing in writing clean code and scalable code. And then I had to transition to that role, and then learn those skills and practice them, and then, move on. So I get what you mean when you say that it's rare for the CTOs. I guess it's just the person and who they are, and if they really care about that part of the job. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. The if you could go back in time, right? So the second is like kind of like our mid-growth, people going from 20, like let's say 20 to 50. We get a lot of those. I get a lot of people that have 20 something people, they're growing 30, they're expected 50 by the end of the year. They're actually doing this off of revenue and not investor capital, which is, what I look for. I look for people that have revenue, not people that I raised a bunch of money. It's like, okay, great. I want to see people that have raised a bunch of revenue. and they're kind of struggling with, growing as the CTO. When do they get the product person? What do they look for in a good product manager? Like, how do they validate and identify the expert that they're going to start to relinquish control of the product, right? Maybe they were working with a designer, they're going to start to relinquish control, put a product owner in place. Like, what do they look for when hiring that person and scaling that part of their business?
Well, the first thing, the most common pattern I see is actually a little different than what you're describing. You're describing the scenario, and I think it's just self-selection because you've been talking to CTOs where the CTO kind of had product responsibility and then they sort of let it go over time, give it to somebody else. More common, I'm pretty confident saying this, but I think this is more common, is there's almost always 2 or 3 co-founders for these startups. And one of them is a technology leader, like you're saying, usually a CTO. And the other one is typically the CEO. And that CEO is the one who usually has product responsibility early on. So it's already in the most common startups, I think, split. Now then the question becomes, when does the CEO decide it's time to bring in a product person? If the CEO may be a product person, and then it'll go typically a lot longer. But if they're not, they're covering it and eventually bring in a product person. Just like they have that question, when do we bring in a designer? Normally for a startup, they'll bring in a designer quite early because they want to make sure their engineers are not building useless stuff. But they don't bring in a product leader until later because, like I said, one of the co-founders is playing the role of the product leader, which I like. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I like them to play that role as long as they can. But at a certain point, the CEO usually has to decide, are they going to focus on raising money or are they going to focus on driving the product? And so many companies have gone through that kind of decision. Sometimes the CEO decides, like Zuckerberg's case, to bring in somebody like a Sheryl Sandberg so that he could really focus on product and not have to worry about running the company. And other times, like at Etsy, the original founder, Rob Cagan, decided to bring in a head of product so that he could focus on guiding the company and let go of the product role.
See, and this is exactly why I wanted Marty Cagan on the show. You've got your whole vast wealth of experience, right? You're experiencing that. I'm experiencing something different. But I think what we agree on is those are like, at some point, the CEO and the CTO need a product person. However, the origin was they comes together when they start to grow that they need to bring in that product person.
Yeah.
All right. That's amazing. The last category would be the 100-person plus, right? I've talked to a couple of these guys. They have a couple hundred people at their company, they're CTOs. And I think for them, maybe something more along the lines of like revisiting and not getting stale or shaking things up or doing some sort of audit. Like what advice do you give to them?
Well, I kind of refer to these, in fact, it's in my new book, I structured it this way. I talk about startups, growth stage companies, and enterprises. And you're now describing the enterprises. Now, at this point, you're probably a public company or you're part of a much bigger company. You've got multiple products in your line. And I will, I'd be the first to point out that most large enterprise tech companies lose their mojo. Most of them lose their ability to actually innovate. I think I understand the reasons for that. It's not really rocket science. Most of the time, the visionary product leader is gone. The company has got all these assets and all these people like lawyers there to protect those assets. And they basically have a lot more to lose. So they're scared to really innovate. This is why I'm so impressed, like we talked about before, about what Adobe did to really put half their revenue at risk to end up with something much better. Most companies don't have the courage to do that. There are some companies, not just Adobe, but if you look at Netflix, if you look at Amazon, which is really poster child for this, if you look at Facebook, they're not afraid to keep making big bets and to keep moving forward. So the issue is if your hypothetical company here has lost its mojo, then the question is, how do you get it back? If they've still got their mojo, then it's about how do you keep it? It's much harder, of course, if they've lost it and you're trying to really turn that company around again. And that's one of the hardest problems in our industry. I spend a lot of my time, well, most of my time is with the smaller startup and growth stage, but occasionally somebody I know for a long time will take a job as head of product, a new head of product at some older company that has really lost their mojo. And I will, do what I can to try to help them get it back. I will tell you that typically starts not at the head of product, but at the CEO. Because we're really talking about a cultural change. And to get that culture to change, to get the leaders to change, how they think about things, how they run their business, how they run their product world, they run their engineering world, how they staff it, that's a super hard challenge. Fortunately, there are several cases where companies have pulled that off. They really got their mojo back. And those are the ones that give me hope and give other people hope that it's possible. But I always tell people it is one of the hardest things to do is to change culture like this.
I was reading your article, the one where you're mentioning Ray, and you started to go on about the culture. How much do you talk about culture in your newer version of your book?
A lot. It's one of the 4 big topics.
Good, because I loved it. When I was reading it, I have you pegged. Everyone does this. I do isolated as the user experience type stuff. And then when I started consuming your culture content, I was like, I want more culture from Marty.
Yeah, well, to me, that is really the most important topic. If you really want a consistent innovation for your customers, it's all about that culture.
Do you ever experience bad products and like want to reach out to them?
Oh yeah, all the time. Sometimes I just, we all do. And sometimes if I know somebody there, I will reach out. I'll get so frustrated. I'm like, dude, this is so bad. You really have to fix this. But most of the time, you just sort of grin and bear it. We can't fix all these. And
you're Superman, Marty. I expect, first of all, you take the responsibility by being the one with the skills. And I fully expect you to be out there like fighting UX battles. Saving the world one interface at a time.
Most of the time, companies understand there are issues and are working to fix it. Like, I believe that Facebook understands today. I think they've actually understood it for a while, but they weren't really publicly acknowledging it. But they understand that there's some serious, I'm not talking about UX issues here. I'm talking about more product, fundamental issues, but they understand. And most of the people there that I know, and I know a lot of people there, they are great people, and they have no interest in doing the wrong thing for the world or hurting the world. They very much want to help, but they're trying. They're working on it. It is also a super hard problem that they've created. They created it, but it's a super hard problem to solve. I'm definitely rooting for them to solve it, but it's not easy. So most of the time when products are really have these issues, it's not like they're unaware. They have some real challenges though.
So they have some self-awareness of it then.
Yeah.
In your experience, yeah. And the last question, right? Super excited about this one. How do you deal with the celebrity of being Marty Cagan? Like, I assume I have this vision in my mind that you have like an endless stream of like product groupies standing on your lawn holding up signs like that say Marty.
Yeah. Well, I hate to disappoint you, but that's not really the reality. So no, it's the product community is growing, and it's a good sized community, but there is not that big, and So
So
it's not like that.
So for the official response to that question, I'm just going to go ahead and mark down excessive security detail, like 24/7. You can't even go to the grocery store without security detail.
No, no. I will say I was in China when I was in China for whatever reason. Um, like my book is like incredibly popular in the tech community in China. I still can't really explain it, but it is, and so I have much more of a of a sort of minor celebrity status there than in here. So
Are you
that's kind of
tall?
fun. Well, tall enough, yeah, but
You're
that
tall enough.
it's not that. It's they've been really eating up product stuff for a long time, and like I said, there's not that many books in product, and I had a good translator for my book several years ago, and it's just spread all across China's tech community.
Oh yeah, if anyone listening ever wants to look into how their language works, it is just absolutely fascinating how they communicate. It's not like we communicate at all. Have you dove into that at all, Marty, about how they communicate with the tones and the different sentiment that they're communicating?
Oh, well, it's because it's such a foreign language to those of us that don't speak it. Um, so I have asked that exact question. I mean, it's like this seems very complicated. Most of these sounds I can't even make, even when I can hear them. So, um, you have to. It's language to learn for sure. I will tell you, I really wish I did speak the language because there is so many great teams in China.
Oh yeah.
Uh, it would be a great place to spend more time.
Their language is more productive. My sister
Mhm.
was explaining it to me how they speak. They'll say, rather than saying, "Oh, do you want to have fish for dinner tonight, or do you want to have chicken for dinner tonight?" They'll just say, uh, you know, dinner chicken, and then they'll use the tone of like tonight, and so it's like real efficient.
Well,
And don't quote me on that. I guarantee you, there's one person out there that knows Chinese right now. It's like, no, that guy's got it so wrong. um, when are you speaking next? Where can the groupies start to line up?
well, I always have talks coming up. I have let's see, I have a couple coming up that are pretty good. One is there is a launch party being thrown for me by Design Map, which is you may have heard of Design Map. They're one of the sort of leading design firms in San Francisco. So that is on the 22nd in San Francisco. I'm going to be giving a talk in Mountain View at Intuit's offices on the 25th. It's called the Lean Product Meetup. If you've heard of Dan Olson or Dan Olson's sessions, they're always popular, and I'll be there on 25th. Those are the two talks coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic. So I'll list those in the show notes, and as well as all the other references and links to the strategy. That's just like strategy and techery together, right?
Exactly.
Stratechery, I think, is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll link all that. And man, this is I loved this. This is exactly what I wanted. This exceeded my expectations. You created a person that loves Marty, right?
Well, cool.